This is our J1200 Audition training. So the first things we wanted to cover with Adobe Audition was a little bit of the interface and how you can import audio. So this is our interface space for Adobe. You will see that we have our files browser right here. We have some stuff called the effects rack or properties. You're not going to do too much with this in our first sessions. You also have history down here, so everything that you've opened and worked with, so very similar to Photoshop. And then you'll have information about metadata, stuff like that over here on the right-hand side. And our main window, the editing window, is right here. Now, if you don't see a workspace that looks like this, that's okay. You can click on Window, and you'll see it says Workspace here, and I'm using the Radio Production one. You might be using the Classic or Default, and you see how those just change up as you click between those. So if you go to Default, you probably have one that looks a little bit like this, where you have the media browser, files, history. We're going to go ahead and work from default for this session. You also notice that in here you can select additional windows to open up. So we have the media browser level meters, which are these down here. We have history, files, essential sounds, our editor. You can turn on a whole lot of other stuff, but this is what we want to have for this session. So we've already got our files. We've got our audio recorded on our phone. We want to import it. So maybe we've already gone through the process of plugging in our phone to our computer and copying the files over to the computer. So let's go ahead and go File, Import, and File. You can also do the hotkey Control-I or Command-I if you're on a Mac. And these are my files that I was working on as class materials, and I have all my bytes and nats in one folder, and then I've got a voice track here. So I'm going to go ahead and just select them all. So what I can do is I can hold Shift and click through all of them, or I could do Control-A to highlight everything, or Command-A, and I'm just going to hit Open, and that's going to put them up here in the file browser. Now we see that right now this one's highlighted, so that's the last one that got imported is here in my editing window. And up top left, it says it is a waveform, which is the little amplitude lines that we see here that's showing the volume levels of each of those clips of audio. Now, so that's waveform, and I can click between them and see different audio clips. And so if it's highlighted blue, that's one we're working with. And we also see the name right up here. It says what file we are currently on. So Plant Ambi or Oberhauser or Carol David. We have all those listed, and we can click through them. Now, we could work with editing one track and on a single waveform line, and we are going to get to using that. But for these assignments and for most of our stuff, we're actually going to be using multitrack. And so if you see multitrack right next to waveform, you can go ahead and click on it, and it's going to say, hey, you haven't done one of these yet. Let's go ahead and create a multitrack session. So we're going to go ahead and give this a name. So mine is Milkweed Practice for our session. And it can ask, where do you want to save it? If you want to save it somewhere else, go ahead and choose. You can use that browse window. I'm just saving mine to the desktop for now for this session. The sample rate, you do want to make sure to set this to 44100. So 441 kilohertz, and then bit depth should be at 16 bits. This is our standard for NPR, so we always like to try to keep this standardized to what you would be using in a professional environment at KBIA. You certainly could do a higher sample rate or lower sample rates, and then it's not going to sound as good. And you could also do higher bit depths, but the problem is if you're using higher quality stuff, it's still going to get converted down to what's actually broadcast out on air. And you're also going to use up a lot more space. So please keep your samples to 441, 16 bits. You're actually getting a grade for this, so make sure you have it there. Your master, since we're recording on a single microphone for each of these things, it's mono. So you're going to leave that as mono master. If you happen to record and it comes in as a stereo file, if you're bringing it into a mono project, it's going to go ahead and collapse those two stereos into one track that's mono. So I've got Milkweed Practice, 44.1, 16 bits, mono. Hit OK, and we're going to see the multi-track window shows up. We have multiple tracks here on the left-hand side, so that's our multi-track. We're going to see our timeline up top, and each of these numbers represents how many seconds we are into the track. If we look down here at the bottom, you're going to see that we have a time code. And that says right now my playhead, this blue flag, is at 24 seconds or 24.436 seconds. You also notice that in the selection view window down here, you have the same thing. It says you are at 24.36 seconds. You're ending at 24.36 seconds because your playhead is starting and ending right there. The start and end points, we'll get into those in a little bit, but let's say I wanted to select a start point. I could hit the I key and that will create a start point. And then I can go over to where I want it to end and hit the O key for out. So I for in, O for out. And you'll see that right now my selection view, the stuff that is highlighted says the selection starts at 12.111 seconds and it ends at 24.522 seconds. It's a duration of 12 seconds, which is a nice little quick way of seeing how much you have for each selection. You could also just select with your cursor once you have audio tracks. We'll get into that in a little bit more. So first thing we want to do is talk about what we're going to do with these tracks and how we can use this window. So let's start by naming some of these. So if we click or double click into those first tracks, we always like to try to keep our narration track at the start. So I'm going to put narration. And then for track 2, we like to do our interviews. Now I have a couple different interviews, so I'm going to go ahead and do a few tracks. So I'm going to put one for just David, and then I'm going to put one for Oberhauser. And I've got Taylor on another one. So I'm going to do Taylor. And then I'm going to put Nats here. I'm actually going to use a 6th track for ambient or ambi. And that's just kind of our room tone and our backgrounds. And we see that we already kind of labeled these tracks. We might not have really nice names for future projects that you're using. It might just be like the audio with a file code. But for this practice, we do have them named. So I'm going to just go ahead and drag these down. You can do the same. So plant ambi should go onto ambi. And then we see wing nat should go onto nats. And I'm just going to go ahead and put each person in. And it doesn't matter where I'm putting them right now. Because we'll go over that. Now, I didn't put anything on the narration track, but I do have a narration track that goes with the script, since this is a piece that ran on NPR. So I'm going to go ahead and import that as well. So that's File, Import, and Import File. And this is back in class materials, Milkweed Voice. And this was done by our past Assistant News Director, Sara Shariari. And Milkweed Voice has a full track, and she has it as individual clips, but they're all one audio track. So we're going to work on splitting clips there. Now, if I were to take my playhead and move this back, you probably heard that audio. If you click and drag, it's going to scrub through it. And it sounds pretty interesting. But if I hit play down here at the bottom, I've got my transport control. So I've got play, move to the back, rewind, fast forward, record. I'm not going to do any recording right now, though. If I do hit play, it also tells me I can use the space bar. I'm going to hear everything play at once.
The Southern North American migration.
We definitely can't play that as a piece of audio on air. So these are going to have to move around. We're going to have to kind of play some puzzle games to get them to line up how we want them. But even if we have these right where they are right now in the track, one simple way that we can play just an individual or not play certain tracks is to use the mute or solo sections. So if I choose to solo the narration and then play it,
a late summer breeze is blowing across the
I only hear the one, and I saw that the meters are also only showing the one. Now, I can solo more than one track, so I could bring in my nats while I hear the narration.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jeff.
And so I get both. I could also not solo anything and just mute the tracks that I don't want to hear.
Jefferson City, Missouri, and over a
Now that shows that I've got my ambience playing as well. So it's your choice. That's 2 different ways to go about it, either muting or soloing. And then also please keep in mind that if you use your scroll wheel when you're on a track, you can zoom in or zoom out. You can also do that over here on the right-hand side. There's this little white selection or like kind of a highlighted section. If you click and drag, you can see more or less of an audio piece. Now, it's not making it louder. It's just making it easier to see. And at any point in time, if you don't like the order of these, like you're trying to work between 2 tracks, it's just as easy as clicking on this little color bar on the side, and it turns into a little grabby hand, and you just move that grabby hand up. So if you want your narration and then you want to have ambience right next, you can move it up, and then you can move it back when you're done. So it's just that simple. Just click and drag. It makes it a lot easier if you're trying to zoom in rather than having to kind of click and scroll between things at the very top and very bottom. So keep that in mind. You do have those zoom functions available. You also have the zoom functions here on the top, and that is the zoom for your timeline. So you can see everything, or you can zoom into just like one selection, and this little red bar in the middle of it, that's where your playhead is. Okay. The zoom controls are also down here on the bottom right-hand side. So you have zooming in on tracks, zooming out on tracks, zooming in on timeline, out on timeline. This is a zoomed out to fit everything. And then you have some additional things to zooming into the in points, the out points, and then selection. So if you did that I and then O, and I chose zoom to selection, I see just what I've selected. If I choose to zoom to in point, I'm going to zoom to right in the in point right in the center, or zoom to out point, I get to the out point right there. Okay, so the I and O are nice ones for in and out point. If you ever want to clear them, just click your playhead wherever you want it to go and just press I and O at the same time. And it clears those in and out points because it puts them at the exact same place. Now, let's go ahead and start looking at some of these tracks. So the first thing we do is we know that the script shows that we're going to have the narrator's voice coming in. And the narrator's voice is going to talk for a little bit. And then we need to cut this clip. So if I highlight the clip, and you see how right now, if I have it soloed, everything else is kind of grayed out to show that it's not playing. But if it's not soloed, it's still highlighted when I click on it. And you can hold control and click to get more of them. So I'm holding control and clicking on multiple clips at a time. But if I just want to cut one, I can go ahead and highlight it or click on it and then do clip split, which is also a control K. Now you notice that there's also a split all clips under playhead. That would split everything. So everything has a very nice clean cut. You can see how that works. Everything got cut. If I don't like that, I can do my tried and true undo or edit undo or control Z. But I want to just split this narration track. So I've now split this narration track and I need to give myself a little bit of workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and let's zoom out to everything and I'm just going to move this over here. Oh, I clicked a little too fast. Which is okay, but that's something that comes up. If you double click on a track, it will take you to the waveform view of it. So if that's happened to you, know that you can click back on multi-track and get back to your overall project. So I'm just going to click and drag this out to give us some space. And while I'm doing that, I do want the ambience, but I don't want these other ones yet. So I'm going to just go ahead and highlight all of them. So I clicked and dragged out, and I'm going to move them over just some. So now I have our narrator's first track introducing the piece, and I've got some ambience in the background. We're going to hear what that sounds like with both of them playing. Now, since I don't have anything else underneath, it's just these two, I'm not going to worry about soloing or muting right now.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson City, Missouri, and over a small garden next to an elementary school.
Now, that was some great writing because she tells me that a late summer breeze is blowing, and I have some ambient sounds of outdoors, of this breeze and plants, and I hear some chirping sounds. So you know what? I want to kind of amplify that a little bit. And to do that, we need to start talking about volume. And we need to also start talking about giving yourself space for your nat sounds or your ambient sounds to take center stage. So right now, our person talking is by far the loudest piece, right? That is center stage for our piece. That's what our listeners should be focused on. The ambient sound is much quieter. We could bring that sound up a couple different ways. So first thing I'm going to do is I only want to work with a little bit of this clip. I'm going to save the rest. So I'm going to go ahead and split the ambient sound and move this one over as well. And I'm going to drag the narrator track out a little bit. I want to listen to a little bit of the outside sound, the ambient sound, to give us a little sense of place, the setting.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson.
Now, it's still pretty quiet, though. So there's a few things we can do with that. I can go ahead and zoom in, and I'm going to zoom in on both these here. So I've got both tracks. So there's a few things that we can do right now. We have volume controls. So now everything on this track, every individual clip, has an independent volume setting. So right now this plant, Ambi, has its own volume setting, and this plant, Ambi, has its own volume setting. And it's shown by this little yellow line. So if I put my cursor over it, it turns into like kind of an arrow with a plus, and I can click and drag it up, and that line tells me a decibel volume level. So right now this is plus 7.8 decibels, so this is going to be louder than this one because my yellow line is higher. So if I solo that, let's see what that sounds like compared to this. Quite a bit quieter. So this one was at negative 30 decibels, and we see that our levels are down here, negative 30 for decibel range. We want to hear our vocals or our primary center stage stuff hitting at about negative 12. So when we see the plant Ambi over here, let's see what it hits at since I moved it up to plus 7.8. It's getting there. We hear a little bit of mic sounds too. We hear some hand movement. That was that last little bump right there. We were holding the mic a little too closely or too tightly. That's that bump. So sometimes those things you get picked up on your microphone that you might not even really think about. Like we didn't hear the mic bumps or know that we were picking that up on our recordings. That's why we always want to wear our headphones, because some of those small sounds in the background can really be something that you're kicking yourself for later on. You know, oh, I wish I didn't have the mic bump, or I wish I didn't have the sound of that car. Just always listen with headphones. You'll hear what your audio recorder's picking up. Let's try something here. And so I was just undoing between those. You saw my history moving. The other thing is, once you split a clip, you can also put your cursor over onto the right-hand side. It puts a little red bracket in here. If you click and drag that red bracket out, it's going to extend the clip as long as you still had more to extend. Like if this is the end of a clip, I can't extend out because that was it. There's nothing else. I can go back, but I can't go past the end of what my recording might have been. Getting back to where we want to go with our volume, now that we've identified a pretty good background, we don't have a lot of distractions, we do want to increase our volume level for that space. Now, we said we can move that whole cursor up, or that whole yellow line. We could also increase the entire track's volume level, this little meter here, and level, we could say, oh, add 12. It doesn't change anything on the clips because it makes the entire track louder. See that? That can be a little troubling because if I bring in another clip on top of it, it's automatically going to be louder, and it's a lot easier to say, treat each clip individually, right? Treat them independently. And that's what you can do with this yellow line here. So on the volume line, if you just click once, don't do a hold click, it's going to put a little blue marker point in. And these marker points, you can click and drag. So it's like a little pen, and you've got your yellow line is now a piece of thread. So I can bring this up into that, +7, +8.1. And what this is going to do is that line is going to tell us how the volume is going to work. So it's going to go down from 8.3 to 0. So we're going to go from adding volume in, and it's going to fade down. We're going to hear that. Now that was a pretty gradual fade. If I bring in my narrator at the same time, we're going to hear how that sounds.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson City, Missouri, and over a small garden next to an elementary school.
Now that sounded pretty good. I can maybe work with that a little bit more. So I'm going to try the in and out points again. I'm going to go ahead and just start at the beginning of it with my I. And I'll end right after the track with my O for out point. And I have this special play section here that says loop playback. If I turn that blue, it's going to play from my into my out point and then come back to the beginning again. And even if I'm making changes, it'll do those on the fly as I'm playing it. So it's pretty cool. First thing I want to do is actually I'm going to bring this audio. The fade seemed, I wanted it to be a little louder. So I'm going to go ahead and put an extra marker point in here. And I'm going to let the fade be a little bit more gradual and then cut down some. So I want to hear some of the background as she's talking about the late summer breeze, and then I want to get it out of there to let my narrator take center stage.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson City, Missouri, and over a small garden next to an elementary school.
Okay, so then it started to come back. Now, it was maybe a little loud to start, even though that was at about center stage, because I didn't have anything else. It just kind of felt jarring to just hear outside sound, so we're softening that a bit.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson City, Missouri, and over a small garden next to an elementary school. A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban...
That feels pretty good. Okay, so I have my first clip. I'm going to clear my in and out point, so I just press that I and O key again. And I want to bring in our next piece of audio from our narrator. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag that over, or I can listen to it by soloing that clip. Let's see, it's the one we want.
That's Carol David of the Missouri Prairie Foundation.
Ooh, so I got to split it there. But if I'm looking at my script, I know that I should hear Carol David first. And Carol's down here, so I'm going to, I want to be able to go from my narrator to Carol David, so let's go ahead and use that grabby hand and bring it up so we can put it right in the middle. And as you click and drag, you see it kind of like locks to where your clips are. And it made that little blue line. That's that, that's this little magnet up here, toggle snapping. and then you also have play block auto scroll, which you want to keep on. But I'm going to move everything else over. So we had that's Carol David. And if I put it right at the end of the clip, it looks like I've got a good block of nothing. So I would hear Carol David, have nothing, and then hear our narrator, Sara, again, as long as I include both those clips for playback.
That's Carol David of the...
And that sounds a little weird to have that big of a gap. So I may use my bracket tool and trim back just to where I want the clip, bring it in. Now, there is such a thing as walking over your clips and having them be too close together. You want to provide some natural breaks, which may be a natural break in including some nat sound or ambient sounds, but you don't want everything to be like bang, 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 bang. We hear a person talking and then the next person, and there's never a gap to breathe. We want to give our listeners the feel of an actual conversation. And so we can see this one here. Carol David's actually kind of walking onto this other clip.
Elementary school.
Okay, so we're standing here.
So I need to move her over some. I saw that blue line mark in. And then I'm going to move this one out some as well. Let's see what we have.
Elementary school.
Okay, so we're standing here next to this swamp milkweed, which is very robust, about 4 feet tall. And I'm seeing a small monarch caterpillar on the underside of one of the leaves.
That's Carol.
Ooh, that was weird. We had a little bit of a cutoff of a clip here. So we could use our bracket and we could try zooming in to that section. And I'm going to put the I and O to just play that part.
That's
And then that looks like this said it's. So I'm going to just take that out.
That's
So she's saying leaves, okay? And I can move my in and out point by dragging up here on the timeline.
That's the leaves. That's the leaves.
So I've got the leaves, and I took out the little extra clip of an it's, right? Now I can move Sara back in. Let's hear how this all sounds together. I'm clearing my in and out point by hitting the I and O key when I've got my cursor in place. And I'm going to go ahead and unsolo so everything is able to be played. So we have our ambient sounds and our milkweed. And I'm going to go ahead and move these other ones over some. So right now we should hear milkweed play with the plant ambience, David, and then back to milkweed. And we'll hear some ambient sounds that are actually going to come in over Carol, so that may be a problem.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson City, Missouri, and over a small garden next to an elementary school.
Okay, so we're standing here next to this swamp milkweed, which is very robust, about 4 feet tall. And I'm seeing a small monarch caterpillar on the underside of one of the leaves.
That's Carol David of the Missouri Prairie Foundation.
Okay. So we heard that this audio just kind of cut off in the middle of it, and this ambient sound in the background, then it came back up. It was a little weird. Now, if we just play Carol, she sounds like she's in the middle of an auditorium.
Here next to this swamp milkweed, which is very robust.
There's some echoing. It sounds like the audio has been cleaned up a bit. We can hear a dog in the background. So having some ambient sounds back there kind of puts her back in that sense of place of the story.
We're standing here next to this swamp milkweed, which is very...
And the dog actually makes a little bit more sense. But the ambient sound just cutting off...
robust, about 4 feet tall.
...is really awkward. So if you click on a clip, you see this little square that has a diamond cut out. It says fade out. You can click and drag that out, and that will bring in a fade out. So now when you play, and then you also have the ability to click on that fade out and drag it down or up to change the direction of the fade out of that linear value. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave that as a pretty straight fade out. And I'm going from almost the start of a clip to where we end the ambient sound.
Okay, so we're standing here next to this swamp milkweed, which is very robust, about 4 feet tall. And I'm seeing a small monarch caterpillar. And
then we have the same problem with the ambient sound coming in. Now, if I wanted to, I could leave the ambient sound on the entire track underneath. But if I don't have enough, I'm going to have to play with fade ins and fade outs, especially if I'm trying to copy out fade ins and fade outs. Like if I only recorded 20 seconds of ambient sounds and we hear the same thing all the time, that's going to be a big problem, especially if the same thing we hear is a car starting up in the background. It's going to be very recognizable that we hear the same car starting like 8 times throughout your clip. So be very careful about the ambient sounds that you're using. If you don't have a whole lot of it, don't use it. Don't copy it over a ton. Just use it once and be done. Use your fade ins and fade outs selectively. So please keep that in mind. Some of the worst things you can do is have ambient sound of people having a conversation in the background, and then the listener can pick it up and they hear the exact same conversation 3, 4, 5 times during your piece. It becomes very, very distracting. So always record at least a minute of ambient sound, and if you think you've got enough, record more. Okay. So things that we've covered so far in the session, we've looked at our workspace. We've brought in audio by doing file import and importing the files. We've taken a look at multi-track and how we can split clips. We've looked at volume levels and then putting in additional points, marker points for your volume. We've also done mute and solo. We've talked about naming our tracks, moving our tracks as needed, bringing in or making a clip center stage and bringing in nat sounds and ambient sounds. Now, one other thing that we can talk about is, let's say we wanted to bring up audio of an entire clip. Say I don't want to do the fade in, fade outs. I just want to increase everything because right now my waveform is real low, my amplitude here. So if I double click on it, you do have that same volume control here, but this now says adjust amplitude. So this is going to be an increased decibel level of that original clip, and it's actually going to look different. So now when we go back to multi-track, we see that this clip is now louder. Now since the plant ambi here and plant ambi here were coming from the same original clip, plant ambi, when I made that change, it applied it to everything. So now this is way loud at the start of my clip, at the start of my piece.
A late summer breeze is blowing.
And that's taking too much of center stage. So that was a problem. That was addressing volume as something that I didn't want to do. And so we're going to go back to plant ambi and take that volume back down, right? And know that those edits, when you're doing it from the waveform, it's not just a simple Control Z. That's something where you have to go back to waveform. You can't, your multi-track and your waveforms are kind of independent.
A late summer breeze is blowing across the lawns of suburban Jefferson City.
Okay, so we've brought in our volumes. We can see how if you did that amplitude adjustment and it was its own individual clip where you did it at the start, that is a way to bring up all of your volume that you may want to increase for that section. And we've got our fade ins and fade outs. So let's say I wanted to bring up wings nats. This is a pretty quiet piece. And this is a nat sound because we specifically put our microphone in to record butterfly wings. They're pretty quiet though. So maybe we want to bring that up, and I will double click on that, and I'm going to bring that up to maybe like plus 8.4. It seems like it's not a ton. If I play it back, it's getting to negative 15, negative 12. That sounds great for allowing it to take center stage. So let's go back to multi-track. So now when I do want to bring in those butterfly wings, I hear them. And the difference between our ambient sound and our nat sound was we made a point to record butterfly wings. We didn't make a point to record the breeze outside or the environment or the setting. It was just, we're going to record in this area, and whatever sounds we get are the sounds we get. That's why we hear chirping, we hear cars, we hear other stuff. It is the sense of place. Our nat sounds are supposed to be bringing in a specific sound for a specific reason. This ambient sound at the start of the track, because our writing was good and it was talking about a breeze, we had a way to kind of bring in ambient sounds as almost a nat, but it helped to establish our sense of setting. For your practice work with Milkweed, you are going to be taking this and your Milkweed script and trying to edit everything to go with the script. So you're going to be moving the voice tracks in with the interview pieces, bringing in ambient sounds as you see within that script, and finishing out your entire piece. Now, please keep in mind that your first audio assignments you're working with your partners, you are not going to be doing a narration track. This is not going to be there, right? We're not going to have that at all. There is no narration track. We're just going to be having interview audio and ambient and nat sound. However you want to include those, that's your first assignment. We're not doing narration until your NPR style assignment. but we are wanting to do this as practice for editing so you know what it's going to look like. And that's going to conclude our training for J1200. Good luck with editing the rest of Milkweed by Sara Shariari.